friends, and welcome to Worldbuild with Us, the podcast where we create fantastical worlds with help from you, our listeners. My name is Rob Hilferty. I'm here with my co-hosts Daniel Quinn and Courtney Staples. On today's episode, we're joined by voice actor Trevor Devall, and we're going to cut to that interview now. Hello and welcome. Today we are joined by voice actor Trevor Devall. Trevor, thank you so much for joining us today.
It is my pleasure.
Absolutely. And Trevor, for those of us who might not know you very well, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I was born in a small farm. I'm a professional voice actor. I've been at it for 20 years. I currently live in LA. I was in Vancouver for a long time. I've been on such stellar shows as Guardians of the Galaxy, where I played Rocket Raccoon, Lego Star Wars, where I played Emperor Palpatine, a gazillion episodes of My Little Pony, and Johnny Test. I'm Dookie on Johnny Test, and the list goes on and on and on and on. So many that I've forgotten them. So that sounds arrogant, but it's just my bad memory.
Excellent. And beyond that, I imagine that you also have a YouTube channel that is called Me, Myself, and Die. Did I get that correct?
You are correct, sir. You are correct, sir.
So I should also mention that our audience is younger. So that Johnny Carson impression,
it's not going to fly. I get it.
Going over everyone's heads, but that's totally fine.
No, I'm just glad somebody here got it. That's all I care.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Daniel and I are ancient mummies. So that's
I'm like 85, so I get it.
Good.
Yeah. So Trevor, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit more about Me, Myself, and Die?
Sure. Me, Myself, and Die is a solo role-playing show where I play all the characters using a variety of systems designed to play RPGs by yourself. I started it about a year and a half ago, mostly because I saw my friends on Critical Role, all of whom I've worked with down here in LA, and I thought, I think I can do that, but just me. And the reason why was because scheduling actors is like herding cats. And I thought, I don't really want to deal with scheduling actors. So I'm just going to schedule one actor and play all the characters. And I thought, won't that be funny? Because no one's ever done solo role-playing before. That's not even a thing. Lo and behold, I do my first couple of episodes and I'm inundated with all of these people going, oh, finally someone has revealed our existence to the world. I was like, what? And pardon the oxymoron here, guys, but a community of solo role players seemed it was kind of a surprise to me. And I learned that there's all these systems and tools out there that people have been using to create their own games for themselves. In solo role playing, for those of you who don't know, is just basically where you are both the GM and the player, and you use a series of randomizers, typically called oracle tables, which allow you to kind of spur your imagination and see where the dice takes you. So other than that, it's just a regular old RPG. And that's how the show got started, and it was very successful. I did 22 episodes in season 1, and then I started season 2 using the Ironsworn system. And I just dropped episode 16 on Monday of that. So it's going very well. Thanks for asking.
That's excellent. I always love an origin story that includes someone looking at a piece of work and being like, how can I do that, but make it 48 times harder and more work for myself?
I mean, when I heard about the setup that you have, which is something like 6 cameras that can only record 29 minutes, and then you have, I don't know what microphones going on. Can you talk a little bit about how insane it is to record those 30-minute episodes?
Well, it's a lot easier now, but certainly at the beginning. So I have 7 cameras. Yeah. And they're all DSLR cameras, which means that they have to be reset every 29 minutes because they'll just stop. And so you have to keep a timer. And if you forget to start the timer, it's not like the cameras go, hey, we're about to stop here. None of that happens. So you just realize, the last 15 minutes are now not there. But so that's difficult because you've got these cameras going everywhere. But also when I was running on battery power, that was a nightmare because you would be in the middle of a scene or in the middle of a fight or something, and you've got the momentum going and everything's, oh my God, this is so great. And all of a sudden, oh no, I got to change the cameras. And you go to the cameras and you realize I have to change the batteries. And that 10 minutes later, you're slaving away trying to get the batteries switched out and everything. And then you get back and the momentum's dead. So you've got to sunk yourself up again to get back in the thing. And it was all just completely draining. I would walk out of those recording sessions just like with no energy. I would collapse on the couch in the house like, oh my God, why do I do this to myself? But there's 7 camera setup. There was only 6 in the first episode, but I added the dolly cam in the second or the season rather first season. But I added the dolly cam in the second season, and I'll probably be adding another angle in season 3. Although I have no idea at this point what it will be. Maybe up my nose. I have no idea. It's who can say.
Going for the rare colonoscopy shot, of course.
Oh, Jesus. Like following up from that, like, so I had very little understanding of what a solo RPG was really until, I mean, I had read about it, but when I saw Me, Myself, and Die, I really grasped what it was about. And you have this intro, you know, the main intro talks about like how it's put together using the mythic system, at least in the first season. The question I had was, it seems that like solo RPGs are driven strongly by that randomness and sense of serendipity. Like you're figuring out what's happening as you play it. And I wonder in your voice acting, even though, you know, you're reading a script, I think you call them prelays is when you guys read the script and go through it. Is there a sense of serendipity at all when you like execute the voice acting in the same way? Like, is there overlap between those two activities?
What do you mean by a sense of serendipity? In terms of like,
I guess in is there any creativity that can happen when you're doing voice acting in kind of like you're surprising yourself and how it ends up panning out?
Yeah. When I'm doing a show, that's a little more rare because everything's scripted, and you know, you're constrained by the writer's words. Sometimes you can kind of dance around them or improvise. I did a show on Netflix called F is for Family, and they were really good about letting us just kind of play around with the lines. Or Lego Star Wars was great for that too. They would basically tell me to come in, and they'd be like, you know what, you just say whatever you want. We'll just record to an extent, which was great because it was always good to have Emperor Palpatine just sort of go off on a riff. You know, it was great.
That's a favorite.
Yeah, so there's not quite as much creativity from the purely acting side of it as there is when you're doing like a solo RPG, because that's 100% improvised. So when I'm playing those characters in the game, in the show, it's really freeform, improvised dialogue based on the given circumstances of what's happening with the characters. And sometimes it doesn't always work. Like sometimes I have to do multiple takes because I say something that is clearly, you know, it's supposed to come out and sound really like, you know, epic, and it just comes out sounding stupid. And I'm like, okay, let's just cut that and do it again. But because I don't do a live show, I can do that. I'm not stuck with all of the dumb choices I make, just most of them. So yeah, that's how that works.
So I would love, so I hate to do the very obvious question, but I am always curious as to why people get into voice acting specifically. And I wanted to give us the very briefest of origin stories for you as a voice actor.
I didn't know it was a job. I didn't know it was a career. I grew up in the 70s and 80s watching, you know, Bugs Bunny and all that kind of stuff. But I never thought that cartoon voices was something you would do. I was just always an actor. I was a theatrical actor, a stage actor when I was young, and I went to university to become a theater director. And my whole life, I just did voices and accents just kind of for fun, and never thought that it could, you know, actually be a paying career. But when I moved to Vancouver, I quickly found out that was, in fact, a possibility. So I auditioned for one thing just on a lark, and I booked it, and the rest is history, basically, because in that business, at least in those days, when someone came along who very clearly innately understood the requirements of the job, phones started ringing. Oh my God, there's somebody new here. We gotta come in. And so pretty soon everybody's talking, and you're being thrown opportunities and work and stuff. So it was a good time back in the heady days of 1998. And it's been great since. But yeah, so it wasn't ever like a conscious decision. There are voice actor colleagues of mine who did that, who always said, I want to be a voice actor when I grow up. And then they grew up and they still had this voice. And so that's what they used in cartoons. But in my experience, it was not a choice. It was just, it's just something that some weird set of skills I was born with. I can't have any explanation for them. I just use them to the best of my ability.
I would imagine that it also comes down to you just probably have a lot of fun doing it, because just
there's that. Did I not mention that?
I mean, frankly, it's been a little bit soulless on my end, but that's fine. One thing you said in an interview though, that the most important thing for your job is you have to know how to perform for the microphone. And I would love for you to kind of break that down a little bit more for us, if you don't mind.
Sure. So when you're an on-camera actor, you exist in the world of the very small, because the camera's on you and you don't have to do much to communicate what's going on with the character. In fact, if you try and communicate anything on camera, it typically comes off as very big and very whoa in your face, right? So an on-camera actor typically exists in the world of the very, very small, tiny little movements of the facial muscles as they twitch as you think about the situation as your character, whatever's going on. But in the world of voice, you don't have anything visual when you're recording the character. That's the animator's job. But our job as the voice actor is to give the animator something to draw. So we have to paint the picture with our voice. We have to paint the picture with our performance, and that means we have to be way more expressive than your typical on-camera actor. If I was to have this level of energy, if I was performing on camera in like some scripted show, well, that's Jim Carrey land. That's a very, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a very specific thing. But if you don't do that in voiceover, in the majority of voiceover, I'm talking animation mostly. If you don't do that in animation, if you don't paint the picture with your voice, then the animators are not going to understand how to draw that accurately. Is basically what it comes down to.
Yeah, with the early, with like early cinema and stuff, when talkies were becoming a thing, I remember reading about the differences between stage actors where everything has to be big and grand and you had to gesture widely, and then as soon as film came along, that looks so hokey as a result, by stark contrast.
Right, it's a perfect analogy. It just in a slightly different world, but yeah, it's a perfect analogy. It's just a different skill set, and I remember when before times, before the dark plague descended upon the land, when we would all gather in a room together, and you would see other human beings and breathe their air. In that time, sometimes we would have celebrities or just like on-camera actors come into the room to record an episode, and if they had never done voiceover before, you could see how terrified they were because they were so out of their element. They did not understand. You know what the biggest thing is too, is when you have to do effort sounds. On-camera actors have no idea what that even is, but to us, it's second nature. Effort sounds just means the sound you make when the character performs an effort. Because
Give me
you
a
have
grunt
to put
too.
Everything. It could be something like my example is always you have to open the door that's stuck. So you have to give us an effort sound, and that effort sound might be come on, right? Well, tell that to an on-camera actor, and they just stare at you with terrified eyes. I don't know what that is. What are you talking about? Effort sounds? Is there a stuck door I can actually pull because I'm so method? So it's funny because by the end of the day, they kind of go, "Oh, I get it. So you guys are just crazy, and that's okay. Okay, all right, I get it. But some people never get it. Some of the on-camera people are never quite comfortable with it, and that's fine. That's our world is for us, not for them. Go away, on-camera people!
Do you think that role-playing kind of gets you into that mindset, that kind of invisible space where, when you're in role-playing games, you tend to, at least I do, I tend to act out, or I think about, like opening a door. What does it look like? What does it feel like? What does it smell like? All of the good GMing shit that you should be doing in the first place. Is that something that you think has helped you over the years, or is that something you just developed to it over time as like kind of a consequence to role-playing games?
I have said before that my entire voiceover career would not exist if in 1980 my friend Peter did not introduce me to the village of Hamlet and I discovered this hobby. Because in 1980 I was 8 years old, and when I discovered there was a game that not only required you to have an active visual imagination, but rewarded you for it in terms of the experience you got out of it. If I never had that, I probably would not be a voice actor today.
No, this was your paladin Black Jay.
Yeah, boy, you guys have done your homework. Wow. Next, you're going to whip out the fact I got some illegitimate child out there demanding child support. Oh, boy. You're sticking it to me now.
Actually, I've got him here in the studio with us.
Yeah, he's going to be on.
Yes. Actually, it's all three of us, you bastard.
Dad.
Yeah. No, it was a hugely influential hobby, to the point where there are people I know, friends I have, that don't understand the game, and they kind of look at it, oh, you're playing some kid's game, and I just think, oh, you poor person.
They
You
don't
poor
get it.
man.
Yeah.
You just don't understand.
You're
That
missing out and
there
you don't
is
even know.
Yeah, exactly. And there is no form of entertainment out there like it. This is an absolutely unique form of entertainment because you are not writing a book, you're not writing a screenplay, you're not acting a script. You are both creating and experiencing a shared imaginary environment that only the people who are actively part of it can experience. Now,
I mean,
it's become a thing, obviously, later with the rise of Critical Role and things like this and Twitch and all of that for people to actively watch people playing games. But even that is not the same thing. It's, as you all know, it's not the same thing as being in the moment and your character around the table with the clatter of the dice and the shared energy of the people in the scene. The scene, we don't even call it a scene, but that's what it is. It's a scene. It's a magnificently unique thing that Gary and Dave came up with back in the day, and we owe them a great deal of gratitude.
I think it was you who said the meaning of life is other people when you were asked about role playing in particular.
I've said hell is other people.
I was going to say, like, I'm pretty sure that's a Beckett play.
When I heard you say that, though, I was thinking, like, okay, this guy runs a solo RPG, but that's probably the best definition I've heard of an RPG in my life. The meaning of life is other people.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, yeah, I guess that is. I mean, I say a lot of things when I'm drunk, and I'm drunk all the time. So, yeah, the exchange that you have with another player, especially in our case, like my old gang, we were very much immersion players. We were very much in the character, speaking first person. Not everybody's like that. Some people like to play in third person. Some people say, my character does this. So that was always alien to us. It was like, no, it's I do this. I inhabit this. So when you're in those sessions, especially where there's a conflict, where one character wants to do something and the other wants to, or teams emerge, not a single die roll is made, but the playing out of those scenes, arbitrated by the GM to make sure that we don't leap across the table and kill each other. There's nothing like it. There's nothing like almost coming to blows over an imaginary elf game. There's really no, I love it. Obviously.
I think there's something to be said about the uniqueness of role-playing games, like you were saying, where it's like, it's very difficult to immerse yourself. Like, that's not Daniel sitting across the table from me. That's Balthazar Spruce. That's not Courtney that I'm about to get into a fist fight with. That's Silent Sky. Like, there is something that you feel so much more innately when it comes to role-playing games, I feel, than compared to any other media. And I think that speaks to the uniqueness that you were talking about previously.
100%. There's no, and the other thing, and this is another thing that contributes to the unique qualities of the game, is that if you've got a table of a GM and 4 players, say, and they're walking through a town, and it's like a bog standard D&D game, and they're walking through town, and the GM is explaining the town. He's sort of describing the sounds and the smells of the marketplace, and he's describing a little bit of this, and maybe a street urchin comes along, and whatever. He's just describing sort of just a little jaunt through town square as they're on the way to something else. If you could put a camera directly into the imagination of each player at that table, they would all see a slightly different thing.
Yeah.
And that is the power of the game, is that every person gets an absolutely individualized experience just for them. It's like your own movie in your head, shot just for you. I just love it. I just love it so much.
And that's why you're here, damn it. This is why we're talking to you.
I knew there had to be a reason.
Courtney, you had a question for us.
Yeah. So about role playing and the sort of individual experience that everybody has. Over the years, I've noticed with my own characters and with friends' characters in RPGs that we tend to gravitate towards certain like overarching concepts or archetypes. But you seem to be really interested in randomness and kind of like the chaos factor that comes into play. Have you found that to be the case with yourself at all? Or have solo RPGs shifted that for you?
That actually that leads into something that I think is an important idea. When I started GMing back in the old days when the Earth was cooling, there was a lot of focus on the epic story, and you want to run your players through the epic story. And as I got older and as I got more experience, I started to realize that I had no interest in running my players through a story because I didn't want to know the ending. And I didn't want to railroad them anymore into, no, but guys, this is going to be so cool when you are forced to do this thing that I think is great. Yeah. I mean, I was really good at running the epic story, but everyone, it's like the old railroad debate, right? If everybody knows that they're on the rails and they're along for the ride and there's a hell of a conductor, then great, sure. But don't expect it to be anything other than a railroad. And that's perfectly fine. There's nothing inherently wrong with railroads. But as a GM, I got very bored of them because I was so tired of not knowing, or I was so tired of knowing all the answers. And I don't remember what it was exactly, but there was a day that came where, and maybe it was the discovery of the Mythic emulator, although I don't think so because I'm pretty sure this happened years before Mythic came out. But I remember when I first saw the Mythic emulator and I went, oh yes, this is precisely the thing that I'm excited about, because what it did was it freed me of the shackles of story as a GM. Because now all I had to do was listen to what the players were doing, interpret it, and roll some dice and interpret that and repeat, or present the world to them based purely on that, rather than this is what I want to happen. And as soon as I freed myself of that idea that this is what I want to happen, then randomness became my best friend, because I was like, this is great. I have no idea what's going to happen here. And then I took it too far. And it became Crazy Town, where now there's no control at all, and the GM's just like, no, I know it's crazy that suddenly you sprouted wings and flew to the moon, but who knew, right? So obviously, like everything in life, it comes back to the middle. We try to strike a balance. But yeah, there was a game that I ran. This is many years ago now. It was in the Palladium Fantasy First Edition system, although a heavily modified version of it. And I was running this game, and I was inspired by this other campaign that I'd been playing in. And what they did in that campaign was the GMs, and it was two of them, which was kind of cool. There was a tag team kind of thing. And they would roll all the dice rolls in front of the screen. And that blew my mind. I was like, but wait a minute. There's no control here. There's no safety net. And suddenly it became very dangerous to do anything, because now as a player you were 100% wholly responsible for your own actions. The GM, he couldn't save you. Yep. And so I fell in love with this, and I ran a total cheap knockoff campaign based, like 100% stolen from these other guys for my guys. And I said, okay guys, here it is. And when I started rolling in front of the screen, and there was this one dungeon called Githchere, and I think that between, I don't know, 5 players, they must have lost 8 characters within the first 120 feet of that dungeon.
Holy shit.
And they were like, they were so shit. They were like, oh my God, you mean we're dead? I'm like, And they were like, but we're the protagonists. I'm like, no, you're not. You're just people in the world. So, and suddenly they became like, oh my God, we have to learn tactics. Oh my God, we have, and that changed them forever. To this day, now their favorite game is Mithras, RuneQuest 6, which is 100% entirely about tactical responses to combat, because they were totally transformed by it, and it blew my mind. That day of where the GM said, as a philosophy, I'm no longer going to provide a safety net for my players. It's up to them now, and in a way, that's really the way that Gary and Dave and those guys back in the old days played. It was very much, here's the dungeon. You go, and what happens, happens. And I think that is a lost art in today's role-playing tables. I can't say that for sure, because I'm not at every role-playing table. But from what I've seen, especially with the philosophy of even D&D 5e, and I kind of criticize D&D 5e on my show, Drinking with DMs, which is available on my Patreon. Not criticize like I hate it, it's stupid, but criticize it in terms of its philosophy is very much about superhero role playing, where all of the characters are awesome and they do everything and they wade through hordes of mooks with nary a scratch, and that's fine and fun for me for about 10 minutes. But that philosophy of you're on your own and you cannot rely on anything other than your own ingenuity and your own skills, to rely on your own skills and a little bit of luck too. That seems to be kind of missing from current D&D 5e, I feel.
I mean,
because
you're totally right. That's the old school revival right there. What you're describing.
Right.
That we want to get back to that. Yeah.
Right. And again, just to be 100% clear, Twitter, I'm not saying that I think that D&D's bad or anything like that. I just from my experience, I prefer a game that's more challenging, which means that I can't rely on fancy little powers given to me by a class that I took.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right when you kind of characterize it as superhero role playing, right? But with 5e specifically, I also have to imagine that there's a lot of video game influence. Like I think that people
100%.
approach it with like, oh, I can do whatever I want, but I'm also a hero. That means that I should not have consequences to deal with for the most part. And what I'm hearing a lot from you is what I love and what I hear a lot of when it comes to like Apocalypse World or Dungeon World, where they kind of codify those rules in GM rules as play to see what happens and be a fan of the players. And it sounds like you're really living that as a GM, and I really do love that aspect.
I try very much to do that. When I first read, it was Dungeon World that introduced me to the Powered by the Apocalypse phenomenon. As it turned out
same
to be.
here.
And I at first I was like, are they telling me how to GM? Who the hell are these people? And then I realized, wait a minute, they're just telling me to do all the things that I've internalized anyway over all these years. And when I realized that, I thought, oh no, these guys kind of get it. And I find it funny when people criticize those game systems as being story games or as being railroady. I'm like, it's actually the opposite of both those things.
Yeah.
Because in those games, the dice really tell the damn story. Like, it's all about what happens with the outcome of those dice. And if you look at like Ironsworn, which I'm doing in my second season, I fear for Arn's life every damn session. Every one. Because I'm not going to cheat. I mean, I'm doing a show, and I know that there's certain conceits I have to have in order to make a presentable show, as opposed to just some guy playing a game. I am aware of that. But at the same time, I'm not going to cheat. I'm not going to save his life if something goes horribly wrong. Because that's not a game then. That's a story. And I have no interest in story. I have interest in game. Even though I'm telling a story, and even though that I'm doing a show about this guy doing a thing, I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in playing the game and seeing what happens. I'm interested in seeing how the game forces the evolution of the story.
And so we're basically getting to your GM philosophy here, or at least tenets of it, right? And I of course have to ask, what do you think, based on everything that we've talked about so far, give us like a top 1 to 3 tips that GMs should have in their back pocket, new, old, whatever the fuck, like the best tips that you've synthesized over your 30 plus years of gaming.
Well, a lot of them I think have already been expressed in games like Dungeon World, which, I agree with the vast majority of them. I think the first one that comes to my mind is listen to your players. Listen to what characters they're building. Take advantage of that, because if they express an interest in doing a thing in the game world, then give them opportunities to do that thing. It doesn't matter what the thing is. It doesn't matter at all. I made a character in my friend Ross's game. This is way back in the midst of time. He was running Rollmaster, and I made a character who named Amarkal the Black, and he was basically a ripoff of Raistlin from Dragonlance, like pretty much 100% stolen. But he sounded a bit like Christopher Lambert from Highlander.
Oh, nice.
Sweet Rachel, so that was Raistlin. He had this sort of hissing, sort of weird sort of accent. Where are you from? I don't know. I'm from Evil. But right out of the gate with that character, in the first session, we found a hint of a scrap of a document that alluded to this character named James Rutherford, who was this ancient wizard and blah, 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 blah. But there was a tiny, tiny, tiny little thing in that document that talked about how James Rutherford assumed the mantlehood of a god and then disappeared. And from that moment, I said to Ross, that's Amarkal's goal. I want him to become a god. I want him to find how Jamie Rutherford did it. Jamie Rutherford, I should say. And become a god. And that campaign, first of all, that was 2 campaigns that lasted 20 years.
Whoa.
20 years. At the end of the first campaign, Amarkal became a god. And at the second campaign, Amarkal became the enemy of the other characters in the second campaign. He became the main
Oh, nice.
antagonist. So
Oh yeah.
that's an example of a GM listening to what his player wants and literally changing the world because of it. Now, that's a pretty big example. I'm not necessarily saying to do that. But if a character says, or if a character is acting in such a way that they show an interest in anything that's part of your world, then just throw that at them. Just throw and see what they do with it. That's it. Because it is a collaborative experience, even though I still am a Viking Hat GM. My word is law. You will do what I say. I control the world. But that said, it is a collaborative game. So I want to make sure that I'm giving back to my players the things they're interested in. So that's one for sure. Oh boy, as a general GM advice, don't talk too much. Can you guess that's a problem of mine? Can you guess? Maybe that might be a problem of mine, talking too much. God knows I'm doing it here enough.
I'm on a podcast where I talk with my friends for hours at a time. I think we can all relate. Yeah.
Let the players have their moments. You don't have to over-explain. That's a big one. You do not have to over-explain. My favorite example of this, and I forget who said it. I think it was the guys on Fear the Boot who said this.
Yes.
I think it was Dan on Fear the Boot who said this. He said there's that passage in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe where they go to the feast. And instead of doing a George R.R. Martin thing where he describes every trencher of bread filled with beef and succulent this and that, which is fine. It kind of really makes me hungry now. What he said was there was food and drink and all the things you would expect at such a feast. And that is all you need, because now the players make their own feast in their head. And if there's an important detail that is crucial for something that happens in the scene, then the GM can describe that. But you don't have to. You could just let them paint their own picture. And that...
Theater of mind, right?
Exactly. And that is... that sort of moves into another topic, which I think is very interesting, especially these days, which is the notion of virtual tabletop play and remote play. It is a very different experience than in person. And I've been doing it almost exclusively for 8 years because I moved to LA 8 years ago, and that was it. I now had to play remotely. All my other friends were at a table, either in Vancouver or Edmonton, and they were all around a table, and there was a little camera set up at the end of that table with a monitor, and that was me. So I saw all them, and they saw me at the end of the table, which actually worked out really well as a GM because, I could see all of them, and they could see me, so that's all you really need. But when you're a player, it's a little different, if you're just one of the players. But the point is that remote play is a totally different animal, and there's you could do a whole show on just maybe you have, on the differences between skills and techniques you need to hone in order to have a successful live game around the table versus a remote game,
Mm-hmm.
And actually, why don't you give us a preview of that right now? What would you say is the number one, like virtual compared to real life?
When you're doing something like, so we play with something like a Roll20 or one of those virtual tabletops with a Zoom or a Skype call going, because we want video. We want to be able to see the reactions of the other people. Otherwise, I can't play by radio. I can't just do audio. I don't. There's a lot of people that do. Yeah, we just use Discord, or God forbid, text. My fingers are not meant to type that fast.
I threw up in my mouth a little bit. Oh
yeah, totally.
No.
I mean, listen how fast I speak. Do you think for a fucking second I'd be able to keep up with these meat hooks? Not a chance. Not a chance. So, what the hell was I saying? Oh yeah. So I guess it would be know your technology, because when you're playing with Zoom, there's a technological limitation as to how many people can talk at once, and that number is 1.
Yeah.
And as soon as more than one person talks, especially if a GM is talking and someone else says something, then everybody else hears is static, basically. And so I enforced a very, very strict rule that when I was GMing remotely, as soon as I open my mouth, you shut the hell up, all of you, because you need to hear what I say. I'm kind of important. Because I'm God. Let's face it, I'm God. So, but as soon as you institute that discipline, it works way better, because now people are forced to show consideration to someone else. What a thought in this day and age. And it works way better. It's a much smoother experience. So know your technology, and don't get hung up on the bells and whistles of the tabletop. theater of the mind, ironically, I think makes a big comeback as soon as we're presented with all of these wonderful virtual tabletop tools, because you realize, yeah, you don't really need it most of the time. And in fact, showing a picture of a character as opposed to a description, again, you're no longer allowing the individualization of that player's experience. Now you're imposing upon them, this is what this character looks like. See this picture? See how every line in his face, see how he's got a certain scraggly beard, see how he's got blonde hair. But if you just describe that character, again, they have their own version of the character. And so I actually think that virtual play can, and overusing the virtual tabletop can diminish the experience for the players in some ways.
Yeah, Daniel runs an online game with pictures, and I tend to just completely disregard the pictures because it's like, that's not what he looks like. In my mind, they look entirely different. Don't tell me what they look like, Daniel.
I mean, I use the photos more as like to give you a sense of what it might look like, and usually I'll just say like, okay, here's, it's kind of like a reference point. That way I don't have to like explain at length. But I totally agree. I prefer to not use props most of the time.
Yeah, I mean, and the funny thing is that I love using props in real life. I'm the DM that, like, if you find like a treasure chest, well, I've got this little oaken box that I've carved, and there's a latch on it. You open it, and there's like, a scroll that I've soaked in tea and put in the oven for a minute, and then I've written in lemon juice so that you have to hold it up to the light and a heat source to show the invisible, like all that garbage. It just, I love that stuff.
What's funny too is when I search for photos to use as reference, oftentimes that will influence how I then create the fiction. And so it's like the circle, which sometimes it can be helpful. And sometimes it's like, you don't want to have too specific a thing. Because then it's like, okay, they're just going to look at the picture and they can't form an image in their mind, which is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. And so you paint your own minis and build your own terrain, which is all amazing, by the way. So I was curious, like, do you tailor your painting and building to specific RPGs or scenes, or vice versa? Have you ever, like Daniel was saying, have you ever seen like a mini that influenced you or made you think like, oh, I want to play that kind of character?
Both. Both are true. The terrain I built was just because I knew I was going to do the show, and I wanted it to be visual, and I wanted to learn a new skill, and that turned out to be building stuff. And Black Magic Craft was the big one for me. He's fellow Canadian, eh? I think he's up there in Winnipeg, but it's a pretty cool show up there, and he's fantastic. The way he builds things is just so. I understood the process. I'm not a very handy guy, so it doesn't come naturally to me. But to watch him, Jeremy, I think his name's Jeremy, really influenced me a lot. But what I would do is I knew, okay, so in the first season, Simon is playing in kind of like a bog standard kind of fantasy Europe kind of thing. So I'm going to need terrain that shows off the basics. I'm going to need, deciduous forests, and I'm going to need big rocks, and I'm going to need rivers, and I'm going to need things like this. In the second season, I knew that Arn was going to the Ironlands, so I'm going to need all of that, but covered in snow. So there was a practicality to why I built the things I did. But when it comes to miniatures and stuff, there was a miniature that I stumbled across online when I was looking for a miniature for the new version of Arn for season 2. And it was this woman, and she was standing there with an exposed knee, and she was covered in this massive cloak, and she had this long flowing hair, and she had kind of this stern look on her face. And I thought, that has to be a character in the show. And immediately I bought the mini and realized, oh, that's Arn's sister. That's exactly who that is. So she became a character that I just put into the world. And so far, she's only shown up once, but she has been like a gargantuan influence on the life of our main character. And so we've only ever seen the mini once, and it wasn't even painted because I kind of suck at painting. But yeah, so kind of both. I think I've answered that question. I don't know.
Yes, I think so. Thank you.
I'm always fascinated to see like the creative process for people, like for just like the smallest things or lines in fiction that get your brain like just on fire, whether it be like a mini that just so happens to be a main character all of a sudden, or entire adventures that have been spawned from a throwaway line from another adventure that you read 7 years ago, something like that. That's always really fun and interesting for me to see, like how that progression tends to work out.
Yeah, because it's always a surprise when something inspires you. Like,
absolutely.
It just comes out of nowhere, and for me, it always happens 4 a.m, and I wake up and I go, oh wait a minute, oh my god, and then I gotta write it down because of course it's going to be forgotten if I don't.
Yep.
Oh,
Um,
definitely been there. Hotel, 2 a.m, wake up to go to the bathroom, and then all of a sudden I can't go to bed for 4 more hours because I'm
Yep.
writing down notes furiously. It's like,
Yep.
all right, this is
Yep.
it.
That's what my
it happened.
Evernote is for.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. It happened to me last night. That's the reason why I got 2 hours of sleep last night, is because I woke up, and I realized I know a crucial aspect of what happens in the next episode, like a story point, so to speak. It just there was something that revealed itself to me that suddenly answered so many questions, and I went, "Oh my God, that's it. That's what it is. That's totally what it is." And so I had to, fumble open my iPad and type it out, and of course it's like, okay, so Blix will bork and bocha, because it's I can't spell at 4 a.m. and I can't type on those iPads anyway, but you get the idea.
So when you give me that accent, I have to ask you this question: have you ever heard or played Morkborg?
I own it on PDF. What a ride. What a ride. What a beautiful, beautiful presentation. What a just a
Oh yeah.
There's another one. They call it a role-playing game. I don't call it a role-playing game, but it's just an incredibly just strikingly beautiful product, and that's the 1,000-Year-Old Vampire.
Yes,
I've heard of that.
Yeah. That's another solo role-playing game, right?
Well, yeah. It's I would call it a writing exercise more than a game.
Really?
But that's just me. But I got to tell you, do yourself a favor and buy that book, because even if you don't play it, it's just this. It's dripping with atmosphere. It's just, I've never seen anything like it. It's fantastic.
All right. Well, do we have any other questions before we roll into the world building jam? Because luckily for everyone, we're at that moment.
No, I'm really excited about this next part.
Oh, as am I. Yeah. Let me.
I do actually have one. I do have one question.
God damn it, Courtney.
I know. I'm sorry. So you've said previously that RPGs and DMing don't require acting, which is interesting coming from a voice actor. And honestly, it's a huge relief to hear, as somebody who is not at all into doing different voices or accents or things like that. So do you have any advice for like creating really memorable traits without those sort of acting techniques?
Yeah. I've always been a voice guy. always. So my memorable NPCs were always based on an accent or a visual tick, or like a way that they open their eyes wide when they speak, something like that. And it was a very physical, acty, performative kind of description. And that was kind of a lazy choice, because I didn't have to describe it. I could just do it, and people would go, okay, yeah, I get it. He's, whatever, he's this. But the best GMs are very much like the best directors that I've worked with, in that they can communicate the essence of what's going on with as few words as possible. They tap. It's kind of like that C.S. Lewis quote, right? There was food and drink and all the things you would expect at a feast of that caliber. That communicates everything you need to know, and you've said almost nothing. That's a disciplined approach to GMing that I do not possess. I am like exceedingly verbose, diarrhea of the mouth constantly. But in terms of advice for people who do not do voices and accents, and you're absolutely right, you do not have to. This is not an actor's game at all. All you need for this is an imagination and some passion. That's it. And some dice and a pencil and a game system.
Passion, that's the key.
A couple things,
yeah. Passion is the key. But if you're trying to GM, you're trying to describe a character, let's say, without relying on a voice or an accent. You can describe the accent if you want. You can say that, like if I was describing Arn Kalapunki without actually going into my sort of Skyrim kind of accent that I do for him, which doesn't really exist on Earth, mind you. It's just some sort of weird thing that is I'm sort of in the mountains north of Sweden, maybe. I don't know. Who can say? But if I was going to describe that accent, I would say, well, it's sort of a northern Scandinavian sound. He has sort of a bassy quality to his voice. He has a very measured way of speaking, so that he never really rushes forward into his words. He's very, very measured and careful with his words. So there you go. That's a description of how that character sounds without actually doing how it sounds. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah, totally. Interesting. Yeah.
Well, with that, I think we're ready to roll on into the world building jam session. For everyone who might not know how this works, we're going to roll up some dice that's going to determine the genre, the subject, and the theme of our scenario. And then we're going to kind of figure that out together. So let's roll some dice. And in honor of our guest today, instead of our normal themes, I've actually pulled up my PDF version of Perilous Wilds.
Heyo.
Where we're going to be using the dungeon themes from Perilous Wilds, because I saw your supplemental video on that, and I clicked on it so hard and so fast that I'm pretty sure I subscribed to your channel somehow. So we're going to roll some dice and determine the genre, and let's see what we get here. All right, so we've got a superhero genre.
Boo!
And the subject that we're going to be dealing with, it's going to be between an item, a monster, a place, an historical figure, an event, or a cataclysm. So we're going to roll the die and see what we get here. That's going to be a cataclysm. And next, we're going to roll on over to the Perilous Wilds PDF and see. By the way, everyone should be downloading the Perilous Wilds PDF as we speak, because my God, that is an excellent. You don't even have to run it in Dungeon World. You can just buy that book and use it everywhere. It's so helpful.
I used it for Savage World.
Yes. So we're going to be picking the dungeon theme first. So let's see what we get. So we've got a mundane theme, and that theme specifically, survival. So we're in a superhero genre. There is a cataclysm, and the theme of this scenario is survival. So, Trevor, you are the guest. You get to basically paint us the scenario that we're going to build upon from here on out.
The world was saved years ago by a group of superhero mutants that emerged out of whatever labs, who can say? But they were a bunch of do-gooders that fought crime and killed terrorists and cowed the evil governments of the world and all that superhero goodness. But there was something, a cataclysm that happened. There was a disease that struck. It was a genetic disease that struck, and it struck them all down, all of them, with the exception of 5.
Oh.
And those 5 found themselves on the run from their former enemies, and they realized that the only escape from their enemies was to try and hide among the normals, the mundanes, those people that they had previously saved who felt that they owed them a debt of gratitude.
And that's where the survival comes in. That's excellent. So my question now becomes, right, because we're creating a scenario, are we playing the superheroes who are on the run? And also, are they on the run because there's like a totalitarian regime that's hunting them down actively? What are we thinking of when it comes to stuff like that?
I have a feeling they're on the run because they're the key to the curing this disease that ruined the other superheroes.
Great.
And does the disease affect normals, or does it affect them differently? How do we want to deal with that?
I think it was exclusively engineered to strike down the genetic code only of the supers.
Oh, interesting.
Gotcha. So these 5 are like the last hopes of the superhero as a concept, essentially.
Yes. And I think what it was called, it was the disease was called the something like the genocide bug or something, because it was designed specifically to wipe out the entire race of superheroes, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure who's after them?
Yeah, that's the other important thing. Who's after these people? The superheroes.
A
large group of cuddly teddy bears. No, I don't know.
Okay.
Like, I'm wondering, is it like, is it a government entity or a corporation, or is it like a superhero who's dying from the disease and wants to like find the cure and they're the only ones? Like,
oh, there's your answer. There's your answer.
Okay.
One of their former colleagues.
Yes.
Who decided that the only way to save his life is to extract the genetic material from the 5 remaining superheroes and use it to develop a cure for him.
Nice.
Because, Yeah, I love
So the
that.
plague wasn't necessarily his fault, but now he's gone more genocidal as a result of him trying to be the last survivor.
Yeah, I don't think he was responsible for the plague. I think he was a victim of it, but it
Mhm.
kind of drove him over the edge.
But what's the guy from Watchmen, the villain?
Ozymandias.
Ozymandias.
It gives me those vibes. But Ozymandias is definitely the mastermind in that case.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't want to discount the fact that you said that they're on the run from cute, cuddly teddy bears.
No, please do discount it immediately.
See, actually, I was thinking, I'm like, we can probably make something of that because this evil villain can probably if we take like Hasbro or evil Hasbro, which I guess is basically the same thing as Hasbro.
Yeah.
Careful, do you want to get sued? Are you out of your mind?
He'll bring the wizards.
Yeah, exactly. But you can take something like that, right? And there's probably like a Chucky-esque toy of Care Bears or something similar that he is using as surveillance devices to try and track.
Is he a
superheroes
child?
down.
Is he actually a superhero who's a child?
He's the boy genius inventor. Yes.
There you go.
Yes.
That's it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the teddy bears it's like a double thing. Yeah, of
He
course.
inherited like a toy company and he's a child. And so he's also like has this corporation backing behind him.
All right.
And an evil child, that's the best thing always.
Yes.
And it's not even Big Brother because it's Little Brother.
Little
Get
Brother.
it?
Yeah.
Little brother,
Yeah.
that's
Little
his
brother.
name.
Yep. There we
There
go.
you go.
Nice.
Okay.
Nice.
Can I
fuck,
just say,
it's
wouldn't,
so
it, wouldn't it be
dumb. I
funny?
love this.
Wouldn't it be funny at this point if I was like, no, guys, those ideas are stupid. We're doing mine.
Well, what do you mean? This is your idea. You said cuddling goddamn bears,
Your
and that's what I'm
fault.
giving you.
Your fault.
All right, so it sounds like we've got a pretty solid scenario basis. Let's
Wait,
go.
do
Oh,
we want
go.
does Courtney have anything that she wants? We haven't heard from Courtney.
So this is making me think of like Mom, the Mom Corp from
From Futurama. Yeah.
from
Yeah.
Futurama. So I imagine that this little brother character like has a pretty big presence in the world, like as the spokesperson for this company potentially, and that gives him a lot of power.
Oh, they love him. The world loves him already.
Yeah,
they
because
know
he's
the
this
toy
like
company.
adorable
he's-
little kid. Yeah.
And not only that, but he's a known hero, right? Like,
Mhm.
yeah.
He is a known
Oh, is
hero,
he like-
and he's a dying child.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna
yeah.
say.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
They want to save him, so all the people. So that makes a division among the humans, the non-supers, because it's like the kids saying, "Hey, he's got these ads, at the cancer child ads," and it's like, "Don't you want to save little brother?" And so the superheroes don't know whether to trust the non-supers because some of them are after them, and some of them actually want to protect them.
He's just so brave. I can't. Oh man. Okay, that's an excellent point as well. All right. I think we're at the point now where we can roll the die and throw in a twist and fuck everything up, potentially. So let's see how that works. The twist there is the world is much smaller than you think. And again, Trevor, because you're our guest and because you have many years of Lego Star Wars voice acting, can we now set this as a Lego adventure? Is that something that we can potentially do?
Like,
And it would
literally
now make,
smaller.
I would imagine, the Care Bears and the cuddly teddy bears much more menacing because they're probably much larger to these people than they would otherwise think.
Sure. Why not?
All right. And any other concepts or ideas that we might want to run with the world is much smaller than you
What
think?
does it mean if it's metaphorical? Is the question. Like
Right.
I love the Lego thing, but what else could it mean if it's metaphorical?
Well, what I
Mhm.
thought, yeah, I was going more that direction myself. I was thinking like the world is much more small than you think, meaning that the people that the heroes are being harbored by are infiltrated by the other organization, so that
Mm.
there's really almost no safe harbor for them. Every time they get to a place of
Mhm.
safety, they realize that they've been given up because there's no one to trust. Is kind of how I interpret that. Like there's everything. It's a state of paranoia the whole time.
Oh, I love that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I love that as well.
So there's almost like a Cold War spy thriller vibe to it somehow.
Mhm. You can see this being set like in the 50s, kind of like throwback environment.
Ah,
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
that would be neat.
I could also see it being something to do with like mind fuckery, essentially, like um, making these heroes who are trying to just survive making them think that certain things are true or untrue, basically like maybe even drugging them in some cases.
Maybe they're trying to fight off the side effects of the disease that they're
Mm,
constantly like. It's not that the disease has killed them. They still have it. They're trying to find a cure, but
mhm.
it's slowly eating away at their sanity. And so there's
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
paranoia
Yeah.
aspect
Ooh,
that you're thinking of too. Yeah.
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah, if an aspect of the disease was almost like an early onset dementia,
Yes.
where
Yeah.
they start to
Yeah.
forget who they are, they start to
Uh,
forget that they even have these powers, and maybe that's what happens to the superheroes. Maybe they didn't die off, maybe their powers did, and they forgot that they were
Oh.
ever superheroes in the first place.
Oh, then the supers
Yes.
can try to find the
uh,
other superheroes too, because they
Yeah,
probably try and search for them.
Yep.
Yeah.
rejuvenate their
Bam.
powers.
wow.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
100%.
This is
You
so
know, I
sad.
hate the superhero genre, but this is cool.
I mean,
Yes.
yeah, me too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Says the
Also-
guy
Kind of
who's
like-
made says the guy who's made his living doing superhero cartoons as well.
It's kind of like Unbreakable-esque, but cooler, I think.
Yes. Although I think Unbreakable was a masterpiece. That's just
It was good.
Unbreakable's
It was
Unbreakable's one of the 2 good movies that he's ever made. So yeah, that's fair.
Bing, you
Yes.
win the prize.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. I think when we're this excited, we've done a good fucking job, and we can just kind of leave it there. Like,
I
we
know.
don't have to go any further. We can just keep it moving.
But if you want to play
when
it,
we
I
roll
think that's when you
characters.
win. Right,
yeah,
exactly.
Mhm.
exactly. Yeah. We want to play it in mutants and masterminds, probably.
Yep.
Just because that's my
Mhm.
preferred superhero thing. Anyway,
Is that a D20 based game? What is
yes.
that?
Yeah.
What was the old one that was D6?
There's several. Are you talking about masks or perhaps
No, like,
champions?
It was
Marvel
older, or maybe it was
Heroes?
D10s. It was really old, and it was like you played, I think, Marvel characters.
Oh, you know what that
Hmm.
is? That's phase rip. That's
Yes.
with
Oh,
where
my
everything's
goodness,
it's
yeah.
percentile dice and everything's
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
one chart and it's all color coded.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one.
I got a
Man,
friend back home.
I love
who
reminiscing about old shit like this. This is perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got a friend back home who uses that system exclusively for every genre he does.
Wow.
Really?
Wow.
I've adapted to like everything's apocalypse world. Fuck it. 2d6, roll it. Just make my life easier.
See, that's so funny. And I know we're in the middle of this thing, but I want to talk about that for a second.
No,
because
let's do it.
a lot of
Yeah.
these games, they say, "Oh, it's great because the GM doesn't have to roll dice." I'm like, "Go fuck
I
yourself."
wanna roll
I
dice.
want
I
to roll
hate
dice.
that.
I like rolling
agree.
dice.
Yeah,
You
I want to
know?
roll fucking dice. That's why I'm
Yeah.
here.
I do agree with that. That's the one thing that I do miss, where it's like, oh, let's break out the red die of doom, which my players
Yes.
know on site, and we're like, no, we
They
just
dread it.
put that away.
It's
It's
the
got
worst.
faded
It's the
numbers because it's like doesn't roll unevenly, and that's because it's my fuck you dice. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
I suspect, I could be wrong, but I suspect that some of the pushback to a game like Apocalypse World or its variants by the old Grognard community is that it's player facing, in that
Yeah.
Mm,
everything that happens to the characters is based ultimately on the choices they make rather than the objective reality of the world
Right.
imposing
Mhm.
challenges on them. And I
100%.
totally empathize with that.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily agree with it, but I understand why they would hold that viewpoint.
Mhm.
Because when you're raised with the idea of, if I'm facing an opponent, that opponent's choices and his dice rolls matter. It's not
Mm.
just mine that matter. Like the player facing thing can be interpreted as a very sort of self-centered navel gazing kind of philosophy. Well,
Mhm.
everything's ultimately about these characters because everything's centered around them. And I'm like, nah, but then the guy rolls a 20 against you and you die. So, I don't know. That's just a random thought.
I feel like we've got to have another episode where we bring you back on and we just talk about like OSR stuff, because I'm super 200% into that.
Yeah, well, it's funny because on my last episode of Drinking with DMs, we went pretty deep into this
Yeah.
idea about the superhero version of D&D versus what it used to be. And if
Mhm.
you want to hear it, you can sign up at Patreon at
Mhm.
memyselfandi.com or whatever the hell it is.
They'll figure it out.
Yeah. We'll probably leave a link in the description of this episode. That's fine. One thing I do want to talk about real quick is that's actually the player facing aspect that you're talking about previously is part of the reason why I have such a hard time grasping the cipher system. Because if you want to talk about like the DM not rolling dice at all, that system hurts my soul because I don't roll a single die for anything.
Yeah.
And it's just like, but I want to roll a 20 and smite the guy. Like, come on, like I want to get in on that a little bit, you know?
Yeah, and especially if you had any kind of like awakening to the potential of randomness like I did. That's all about rolling dice and interpreting the results. You know, I want to hear the
Absolutely.
clatter. Because I have my
Yeah.
favorite dice, of course. Yeah, we all do. But I've got my killer dice, my killer white percentals. When I was running Hard Master, and I rolled in front of the screen because I'm a killer GM apparently. And every time I pull those dice, it's like, oh my god, we're dead. We're all dead. We're all dead. And most of the time, they were right. So that was fun.
That's the joy, right there.
Yes. And that's the thing that I miss about like face-to-face gaming is that when I roll like really well and it's just me, like there's no other person to glance over and be like, whoa, look at those dice that he rolled. Or like there's none of that excitement. It's like, let me move my camera
on your dice.
Yeah,
That's
let me move my camera so you can see it. It's not the same. There's just not the same energy.
So do you guys then, when you're doing like Roll20 or its variants, do you use real dice or do you use the? I'm guessing you do instead of the dice roller.
We use real dice.
I can speak to So like I use Discord, but we have a player who's actually kind of like the caller in old school gaming, who has another screen up that does all kinds of stuff for me. So he has our initiative in there. If he could potentially show a dice tray if he wanted to, or my screen. So it's like we don't use Roll20, we just use Discord with that special setup in OBS. So it's complicated, but it's great because the players feel like they're taken care of, throughout it.
Yeah, that's how can I get in on that?
I can show. I'll send you what the setup is so you can see what it is. It's actually pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Wow.
Okay, we're having a lot of fun here, but we're gonna wrap it up and send it on over to the rapid fire questions. I'd ask if you're ready, Trevor, but no one is. So here we go. My wife wants to know, Trevor, is cereal a soup?
Yes.
All right.
Depending on the liquid.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. And
nice.
I would love to know. Tell me about your most memorable player death.
As a player or causing the player death?
Whichever you prefer.
Because of the latter, there are too many to share. Most memorable player death. I have only ever lost one character in my entire 40 plus years of playing.
Wow.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And it was the very first session I joined. It was a D&D 3.5 game. And I'd never met these guys before. I found them online. I was like, I'm going to go play with these guys. And so I went, and they were right in the middle of this Underdark kind of campaign. And I joined as this really cool kind of dual-wielding, not a Dritz Stewart type. He was a human. But he was like this, rogue guy, really cool, and all that stuff. And the first thing that happened was we got attacked by like a lich and a dragon and underground and bad. And we all got killed, TPK. And I was like, well,
cool.
First session, huh? Okay.
Wow, yeah.
Wow.
So that kind of sucked. But at the same time, I was like, finally, I died. Okay. I feel like I am a man today.
All right. And another quick question. What have you been playing recently?
Well, Iron Sworn on the show. Before that, I was running a Stars Without Number campaign for my guys back home. Mostly because I think Kevin Crawford is a bit of a mad genius when it comes to his DMing tools and his behind the scenes world tools, where you have all of these different factions and the DM plays like a little mini game in between sessions to see what happens with each faction. That was the most exciting part of the game for me, and there was no players involved. What does that tell you?
I mean, you've literally cut out all of the players in your show except for you. And we knew this coming in, right?
I think I might have a bit of a problem.
Daniel, hit him with the rapid fire questions. Go ahead.
My rapid fire question is, what is your favorite nightmare convention story?
Oh my god, dude.
I knew it.
I coined the term, as far as I know, con-eye. I was at a convention many years ago, and I'm not a big hugger. I'm not really into, humans so much. But, it's a convention, and hey, they all want to hug. And so it was like the Saturday afternoon. I forget where it was, some city. And this girl comes up to me, and, she's been in the costume for 3 days, and she's a little sweaty, as, you can imagine. She says, "Can I have a hug?" She accosted me in the middle of the hallway as we're going from panel to panel. And I'm like, sure. So I give her a hug, and then at some point I must have just kind of wiped my eye, because that night I woke up with pus running out of my eye.
Oh no!
And realized, I've got con eye. And
Oh,
so that was fun.
Oh, Jesus.
Oh, that's terrible.
horrible.
Yeah.
Oof.
Daniel, any others?
I know you are a huge fan of like dark fantasy / Warhammer. If you could,
dark future.
yes, if you could voice act any character that you haven't yet in that realm, what would be your favorite to do?
In the Warhammer fantasy world?
Not just Warhammer, all of dark fantasy, all of it.
Oh, wow.
Hmm.
Like, are you talking any established character in fiction?
Yeah, like you get to be on whatever show you want. It's dark fantasy, and this is like your dream fantasy character, dark fantasy character.
Oh, boy. To tell you the truth, I think I've already played him, and that was Amarcall the Black, who doesn't exist in anything other than our Rollmaster game. But I did start working on a pilot to turn that campaign into a series. And I still think it has legs, frankly, because it was very good. So if that's the case, it'll be, if that ever happens, it'll be Amarcall the Black.
Nice.
Excellent. Courtney, you've got rapid fire questions. Go ahead, hit them.
All right. Be honest. How many minis do you own?
Looking at them right now, they're on the shelf behind my setup. Oh boy.
At least
The thing
5.
is, I did that Reaper Kickstarter last year, so
Oh
I've
my
got
God.
800
Oh my
more.
God.
Yep.
I'm
Oh
so
my
guilty of
God.
that. It's
Yeah.
terrible.
I am also guilty of that. Yes.
Nowhere to put them. No idea what I'm going to do. I don't know. Right now, I'd probably 250, maybe something like that.
Oh, that's not.
Oh, okay,
No,
that's
it's not.
reasonable.
I'm not. Oh, wait. You know what? No, sorry. I lie. I forgot about the entire closet of unmade Warhammer 40,000 stuff I've got in there. So add on another, I don't know, 300. Who knows? Something like that.
All right.
That adds up, yeah.
Any others, Courtney?
Literally, I have to buy a bigger house to find the room.
That's what happens
For my minis.
I mean,
It's just such a good deal when they put out their Kickstarters. It's like, how
Oh,
can you
God,
not?
yeah.
How can you not just throw money at it and get minis that you don't need? And one more question. What was your favorite book series as a kid?
Lord of the Rings.
Ooh,
Yeah.
wow,
Makes sense,
fast.
yeah.
nice. All right, so we're almost done with the rapid fire questions. I've got one other. Trevor, can you tell me someone that you want to shout out and deserves eyeballs besides yourself?
Deserves eyeballs.
Or ears? Whatever
Boy.
body part that you think is appropriate.
This guy needs a spleen. Throw him your spleen. Yeah, I mean, I would say Black Magic Craft, but he's already got so many subscribers. I don't know if he needs the help. Somebody who needs the help besides me. I need the help. It's me.
You can go with Black Magic Craft. They don't need help. They just want more eyeballs. More is always better.
Yeah, then I would say him. Or I'll tell you who. I love this guy, Seth Skorkowski.
Yeah,
on
friend of the
YouTube.
show. We've had him on. He's
Oh
great.
yeah, when I first saw him, I was like, "What are you doing with the characters, really?" And then immediately I was like, "Oh no, I kind of love this.
Yes.
I love how he's
Yeah.
going back and forth."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm just like, he's so honest, he's so genuine, he's so just exactly what he is. I'm like, yeah, I love him. Hello, internet, Seth Skorkowski here.
When
Go
we
on,
had
Seth.
him on, we bonded over our love of the Brendan Fraser film The Mummy, which I still think is
great.
criminally underrated.
Uh-huh.
I agree 100%.
Yeah. And finally, last rapid fire question. Can you tell people where we can find you? Not in a creepy way, but just in a social media. Please plug yourself away.
Well, the biggest thing is my show on YouTube, Me, Myself, and Die. I'm always happy to, accept new subscribers and respond to comments. I try and respond at least with a like to everybody who says something, nice. Other than that, I am on Twitter, although I think it's a cesspool and the greatest cancer that our society has ever known.
High five. Totally agree.
So there's really kind of pointless trying to find me on Twitter because I hide as much as I can. Facebook as well. I'm no longer active. I just got tired of everybody yelling at each other the same things over and over again in the echo chambers, and I was like, it's giving me a headache. I want to go home. I want to go home. So yeah. How can they find me? I have a website, but no one goes to the website. It's mostly the show. I'd say Me, Myself, and Die on YouTube. I have a Patreon as well. If you're interested in checking that out. Link below, apparently.
Oh yeah, we'll link that up. Channel and Patreon. Fuck it. Yeah. Cool. All right, Trevor. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a real blast.
Yeah, me too. That was much easier than I thought. I was scared. You had me scared.
I love the freaking superhero thing we come up with. That was fantastic.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
really
Yeah,
good.
and considering that it's the worst genre out there. Yeah, that's
Yes.
right. I said it. I said it.
I mean, I
Internet!
agree. I always cringe when I hear superheroes. I'm like, oh, same tired
Yeah,
tropes. But that's something
yeah.
new right there.
I'm
It's
sorry
totally-
that you don't appreciate mythology in a modern sense. You
Oh, I
uncultured
know.
fuck.
Hey,
I
Star Trek
know.
is modern mythology. Thank you very much.
Yes, that too. Yes,
Uh-huh.
it is modern mythology, but still, go fuck yourself. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Exactly.
That's fine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Listen here.
You know what I love? I love, like you said, this idea that we came up with is great because it's such a twist. It's such a departure.
Yeah.
That's the reason why, obviously, The Boys was this wonderful, wonderful thing that came across my
Mhm.
Amazon account.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you're telling it how it would really be. Okay, I'm in. I love it. These are all
told me about
assholes.
Legion before too, which I was surprised by how weird it was. Like,
Yeah.
that's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
Trevor,
Yeah,
have
I
you
love
seen
the
Legion?
twist. I mean, honestly, you are right. The superhero genre is just a modern day reimagining of classic mythological tropes. But
Yep.
there was always something about it that I could never get into. I was always just like, you know what it was? It was soap opera syndrome. It was the fact that no matter what happened,
They're gonna
there
come
was
back.
never any lasting consequences. You
Yeah.
never, ever thought that anything lasting was going to happen to the characters. No one ever lost an arm. No one ever, whatever. There was it was always, everything was back to status quo at the end and we're all fine and
Mhm.
square jawed. And I'm like, no, I want to read Game of Thrones where Ned's
So
head is
dark.
gone now.
Okay, see, yes, but also the thing that I love particularly about like comic books in general is this idea that you can cut off the canon wherever you want, right? Like I consider runs of certain writers to be like, that's the story. So when Ed Brubaker does The Winter Soldier and you get a cool espionage story with Captain America and Bucky comes back and you're like, whoa, what's that? And then like you can completely disregard so many of the one where Captain America becomes a werewolf, or the one where he beheads a vampire and Richard Nixon's involved. Like all of that
So you
shit.
mean like it's a fun sandbox of self-contained stories?
Yes,
because-
you
I
can
see. Okay.
compartmentalize the genre
Right.
so much easier than you can anything else. And I think that's what I can appreciate about it, is that I can have Captain
that's
America werewolf, and I can also have slick 1950s like Cold War shit, like
See,
that's what I love.
The thing that you appreciate about it is exactly the thing that I abhor. And,
he wants canon. He wants his canon.
I'm the guy, for example, that will never, ever run a module more than once. Even if it's with a different group.
Mhm.
Because to me, once the module is run, that's how it happened.
Wait, are you mad that Tom Bombadil's not in the Lord of the Rings movies?
I'm not going to get into that.
Sore spot. Okay,
Chris should have
understandable.
been here.
No.
Chris should have
No.
been
I know,
there.
it's too bad.
This is
That's
our
a case of selective editing when you're transferring from one genre to the next.
I see.
No problem
I
with
see.
that.
Gotcha.
The issue I have is when you take an established story that has already happened, characters have already had these things happen, and then you say, do-over, it never happened, we're in an alternate reality now.
It's not interesting.
Do
to you. I
not-
get it. I
Do
get
not
it.
like.
Yeah.
I see
understand.
translations. I see translations as exactly that. Like that's why when I look at the Marvel movies and people are fucking butt mad that it's like, oh well, the costume's off because 6 inch. Like no, fuck that. I don't care about that. This is an entirely different universe that I can come to appreciate. Although on the fucking flip side of that, I'm still pissed off that V for Vendetta is the worst fucking comic book movie of all time because it's fucking garbage and I hate it.
See, now that's interesting because I never read the comic and I love the movie.
I thought the movie was fine. Same here.
That is the problem, is because you're missing all of the fucking cool
Like, I never
political
watched the
commentary that Alan Moore injects into it. And
Well,
you're getting all of the fucking, oh, I'm going to say a V word 7 times in a row and that's going to be clever. Like, fuck off. Get the fuck out of here with that shit.
Can I just say,
Please.
the voice work that Hugo Weaving
Of
does
course.
in
Yes.
that
Yeah,
movie. Oh my,
absolutely.
he's silk.
Yes.
He's silk
Yeah.
from behind that mask.
He's a
Oh,
French chef because his voice is so fucking buttery. Absolutely.
oh, my. Oh, look at you.
I did appreciate Watchmen though. Like, other than its ending,
too.
like did a great job, I think.
It's
replicated
again,
the
it's style.
comic perfectly.
You're getting the style of it.
Okay,
and
but you
that's
know what?
fine.
I think this is
It
all
was
beside the
exactly
point.
the same.
Yeah,
This,
very
I
good.
agree. They reproduced it shot for shot. Which a lot
Shot
of
for
people
shot.
hate.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
they
can't
did,
tell
yeah.
me it
I
wasn't
thought it was
exactly the same. It was.
Also very incorrect. That's fine. We're not here to talk about Watchmen. It's okay.
It's literally shot for shot. How
It
can
is.
you disagree with that?
It's like extremely loyal.
That's what all these comic book guys were critical of. They were like, "Yeah, you just shot for shot." I'm like, "Yeah, it's a
Right.
graphic novel. It's laid out like
That's
a
what he
storyboard.
did.
Of course, it's shot for shot."
Okay, you know what? That's we've gone over our time.
Don't get him started. Don't get Rob
Suddenly,
started
we're out
on-
of time.
Like Trevor, we know how to push his buttons. Like, don't mention dwarves. Don't mention
Dwarves
fantasy
suck.
races. He'll go crazy. But do it.
No, honestly, I've never been mad on this show except for when talking about V for Vendetta. I've never been so mad. Also, yeah, Watchmen, sure, like whatever. I'm not going to die in that hill. Like I can be wrong. I've been wrong before on my show. I don't give a fuck. Like,
Well,
it
if you're not passionate about something, then
Yeah.
what's the point?
yes.
Exactly.
Although I will die for V for Vendetta. That movie can just go fuck off and die. I hate that.
You know what? I'm gonna go watch it. I'm gonna go watch it right now.
Yeah, let's go get on Discord, guys, and we'll watch it.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
Tell me when you get to the part where nothing matters, and by that I mean the entire movie. Anyway,
Oh my god.
Trevor, again, this has been incredibly fun.
So much
This-
fun.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
think we've ever stretched this far past the point where we normally end. But
I
honestly-
can't wait till someday we all can, like, if we can meet you at a convention and then I'll give you the con eye. Like, that's my hope.
yeah,
Wow, that's
It's a nice group hug.
thanks.
Yeah.
yeah, Daniel, that doesn't sound as endearing as we think it does. All right, but seriously, I think we should end it here. Thanks again. We definitely have you on the show whenever you want, Trevor. Like,
Yeah.
consider this an open invitation. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you. My pleasure. Good talking to y'all.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm an American now. I can say that, y'all.
And that was our interview with voice actor Trevor Devall. I don't know if you could tell, but my God, did we have just a ton of fun talking about all sorts of nerdy shit. That is by far the longest we've gone past our regular, like,
He
like our
is like a
regular time.
blast. Like, I want to
Oh, yeah.
go get a beer. I want to play that superhero game with him as soon as it's possible. You know?
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. We're probably definitely gonna have him back because man,
Yes.
we could talk for hours about how wrong he is about superheroes, and that's totally
Hey,
fine.
he's like an old school gamer after my heart. I swear to
Yes.
God.
Yep, absolutely. And of course, like the one interview that Chris misses is the one where like, oh yeah, I'm
Yes.
like super in Lord of the Rings, and say, yeah,
He's a Lord of the
exactly.
Rings fan.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah,
I mean,
it's fine.
what I thought was really great is he really nailed it, even though it's had nothing to do with the topic of the interview. He really nailed how the modern, what people call story gaming, apocalypse world games, how
Mhm.
they dovetail with the philosophy of old school gaming, and how really at their core they're the same thing. And I'm like, he said it so
Absolutely.
simply that I've seen that expressed, but not so simply before.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's one of those things that it's kind of like when we had Justin Alexander on, where you can,
Yeah.
there's all these intuitive things that you know about gaming, and until there's someone who codifies them and sits down and
Mhm.
says like, hey, this is how it is, this is how it should be. You're like, oh, I've been doing that the
Right.
whole time and not even actively thinking about it. You know?
It's revelatory to have it written down, but at the same
Yeah.
time, it's like, it's stuff that we fundamentally have to understand about the game.
Mhm.
Yes, absolutely. Also, Courtney is going to say something now. Courtney?
Oh God, why?
She's like, God damn it, why would you do this to me?
Why?
And Courtney, this was your first interview with us. What did you think of the interview?
It was my first. No, I thought it was really fun. Really, really fascinating to kind of hear his approaches, and of course, amazing to hear all those voices that he does. Yeah, it was just
Mhm.
really, really cool to kind of learn more from him.
Oh yeah, yeah. As someone who also does voices, at the gaming table, I'm glad that it's like not just me who I'm like, I just kind of want to break out into a silly fucking voice sometimes, or like, and I actually really related to like giving characters like really like defining characteristics, whether
Mhm.
just by doing it. Like I think when it comes to when I create NPCs, it really comes down to creating something that is memorable. So you can tell who the character is with like a very simple, subtle motion of how they act and and how they talk, even in some cases.
And he says often in other interviews too, he talks about the key, at least to voice acting from his experience, is having A, like he said, passion, but also B, he says where a lot of other voice actors fail is they don't have the expressiveness built into how they act. He says like to voice act, you actually have to learn to act. And it's because that's where he started, was doing theater acting too, like and directing. So it's like it makes sense that when he brings that to the game, you can't just, it's not just a matter of bringing voices. You can do that helps, but it's the passion behind it that makes it work.
Yeah. And I would also strongly recommend, we're going to leave links to all of his work and all of his like the YouTube channel and his website in the description, so please go ahead and check that out. And while you're doing that, if you want us to build a world for you or with you, you can always go ahead and send us an email at worldbuildwithus@gmail.com, or shoot us a tweet over at Let's Worldbuild. And alternatively, if you want to come join the world building community on Discord, link in the description right next to Trevor's. And if you're feeling particularly generous and don't want to give money to Trevor, give money to us instead over on our Patreon, link also in the description. And that's going to do it for this episode of World Build with Us. Thank you so much for listening. Remember that we love you very much, and we're going to get through this together. Until next week.